This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Bored with your boring cardio? Stop pedaling that snooze cycle to Nowheresville and try some cardio that's actually fun. Supernatural Fitness, available on MetaQuest. Isn't that right, Jane Fonda?
Cardio will never be boring again.
Sweat to the beat of thousands of chart-topping songs inside stunning virtual landscapes.
Bet your stationary bike can't do that.
Visit GetSupernatural.com and join the next fitness revolution. Supernatural VR Fitness, only on MetaQuest. Rated Teen for Teen.
I have a friend who broke up with their partner because he couldn't eat in front of other people. His fear of food and eating was that strong. That meant that every outing, every movie theater, every farmer's market, going bowling, literally everything where they might need to eat, he wouldn't go. It's an extreme example, but if you think about it for a minute, there are lots of kids and adults with angst about food. You know the parent that worries that their 6-year-old won't eat anything at a party because there aren't their safe foods, so they pack a snack for them. I knew a kid who went to camp for an entire week and survived on Snicker bars. The foods he is willing to eat are that few, and they didn't have any of his foods at camp. And this is not an uncommon issue for people. Being this restrictive about food is not a fun way to go through childhood or to live as an adult. We teach our kids to sleep, we teach them to ride a bike, and we are partly responsible for how they learn to eat food. Adolescent medicine physician Dr. Maya Kumar returns today to give her tips about what clues to look for in kids that may warn us they're developing an unhealthy relationship with food, and how to raise kids that have an easy relationship with eating. I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter, and I'm the pediatrician next door. I'm that doctor friend you call for practical advice about your kids' health. I mix the science of medicine with the reality of parenting. We doctors saw a lot of eating disorders pop up during and after the pandemic. According to Dr. Maya Kumar, chair of the Eating Disorder Committee for the Society of Adolescent Health and Medicine, there's a reason we saw this happen, and there are lessons we can learn. She explains that typically there's a trigger in a susceptible, vulnerable person. In someone else who is vulnerable to substance abuse, for example, the same trigger might make them turn to drugs. So why did we see a surge in eating disorders during the pandemic? Dr. Kumar is back to share from her experience as an eating disorder specialist about how we can raise kids that feel good about their body and have a normal relationship with food. What kinds of things might cause disordered eating? Here's Dr. Kumar.
For some people, there is no obvious trigger. It just kind of happens. For other people, there is a trigger. There's some kind of life stressor, and then they kind of get tipped over the edge. So, for example, they got bullied in school, or a major life change at home, like parents getting divorced, or a big move, or changing schools, all kinds of things that could happen, and that is often their tipping point. But for all the youth in the world, they all had a trigger at the same time, which was being put in quarantine and dealing with lockdown measures at a time when it's most developmentally inappropriate to be socially isolated. And it's not that the pandemic gave people eating disorders. The pandemic triggered eating disorders in a bunch of vulnerable people all at once. It would almost be like if everyone's parents got divorced at the same time. And then but that leads to another thing, which is parents are often saying well, if we hadn't got divorced, maybe this wouldn't have happened. If we hadn't moved, if we hadn't changed their school, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And I always tell them, please, please, please don't blame yourself, because the reality is your kid was vulnerable. It is very likely this would have happened at some point in their life. If it wasn't your parents getting divorced, it might have been, a friendship or relationship going sour, or going through a high pressure period at work or school. I mean, it could be any number of things. But that vulnerability, like, it is what it is. And I think parents should try to pick up on whether their kids have that vulnerability. You can often figure that out from the time that they're very young. I mean, if you see kids sort of using words like fat and throwing it around a lot, or if they're asking about questions kind of related to weight, or is this food good for me? Is this food bad for me? And this is where, if you have a kid who's like sponging up those kinds of things, I think being mindful of your language and the subjects that you talk about in front of them is especially important.
I do know, and I have talked about this before, when parents are labeling foods, oh, don't eat that, that's a bad food. Like, that's not a great idea.
It's not a great idea. And I think that the single biggest thing you can do to protect your child against poor body image and disordered eating disorders, et cetera, or really, I'm going to say two single biggest things. Number one, be a role model. Do not engage in weight-related criticism of yourself or anyone else. Do not give the impression that anyone's value, including your own, is rooted in your weight or shape. And then the second thing is, make it a priority from the earliest days to create a healthy relationship with food for your whole family. And that means, exactly as you said, Wendy, there are no good foods, there are no bad foods. All foods are okay.
Right.
One thing that I sometimes tell my patients is, like, if you go into the middle of like the Amazon rainforest, or you find some other civilization or society that's very, very remote from ours, with really no interaction, they will have naturally evolved a diet based on what's locally available to them that includes a variety of food groups. And they will also have their version of dessert. They will have their version of something that's like a little richer, a little bit special. And it's typically enjoyed socially with other people. Or it's for festivals or celebrations or holidays or just family gatherings. Even a completely untouched society will have that. It's the most natural thing in the world. And so I had a dietitian colleague who said, we all need to make room for what she calls celebration eating. I love that.
Celebration eating. I love that too.
Yeah, I love that. So I started stealing that and being like, a normal, nutrition pattern includes celebration eating. It includes, like, when you and your basketball team all go out for like In-N-Out. It includes when you enjoy birthday cake at a birthday party, or you have ice cream when you go to the beach. I mean, those things are all part of a healthy nutrition pattern.
So incorporating foods like that into your social structure of your home and your family is a great idea to model good eating patterns, right? Which includes celebration eating.
And you should do that yourself. If it's your kid's birthday and you got them a birthday cake, have a slice. Eat it in front of them.
And don't comment on the guilt of eating the slice, right? Don't later say, oh my God, I can't believe I ate that cake. Now I have to go run or whatever.
Right. But just be like, oh man, this is awesome birthday cake. And just leave it be. You're not going to have birthday cake every day, but it's a birthday party. There's birthday cake. Enjoy it. Maybe let's step back a little bit, because people may be listening right now and thinking, well, what's wrong with eating healthy? What's wrong with eating clean? Because I definitely get that response a lot from parents. These concepts of eating clean and eating healthy, as we see them in our society, really tend to play into that categorizing of foods as good or bad. So clean is just another word of saying these foods are good, these foods are safe, and all these other foods are not clean. They're literally dirty for me. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that dichotomization is exactly what tends to lead to disordered eating, whether that's restrictive eating or binge eating or emotional eating. Good versus bad never ends well.
Yeah.
But coming back to your question about, what's wrong with clean eating or healthy eating, when you remove flexibility you tend to run into difficulties. And I think that we need to keep in mind that nutrition is not a purely physical concept. It's also a social concept because we're social animals and we eat together. And if your kid only eats clean, then they're likely going to hold back on their social interactions in some way, shape, or form because they don't eat clean at a sleepover. They don't eat
Right.
clean when they go out for a post-sports eating celebration. And if your kid either goes to those things and then doesn't eat, or even worse, just stops going to those things because there isn't food available for them, they will suffer.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I often tell people is your eating is not just to meet your basic needs. It's also a hugely important way of how you present socially to others. So an example I often use with parents is someday your kid is going to go on a date. And that date is probably going to involve eating something. And it's probably going to involve eating something that's not a green smoothie. You know what I mean?
Right, right. Yes.
It's going to be real food. And it's probably going to involve some kind of celebration eating, right?
Mm-hmm.
If your kid is thinking about the food and not about the individual they're with, how sad for them.
Yeah.
How will they form meaningful friendships and relationships if they're thinking about the food as opposed to the people they're with? Or, how many jobs are there where you have work lunches or work dinners or things like that, where you need to be able to eat normally around other people and be flexible about what's available?
That really reframes it, I think, for parents to think about how they're role modeling eating with their kids. I always talk about the importance of family meals. Like it's just crucial in like a billion different ways, but I never thought about it in terms of like, okay, this is a skill you need for life. You're going to be offered bagels when you're at a meeting, and then they're going to say, do you want to go out and get a burger? And you have to know how to negotiate food and order and eat in front of other people, right?
Yes.
That's so interesting. I never thought about that.
And I do think that there's, even among my eating disorder patients, some of them get to the point where they can get by as long as they can control everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not necessarily underweight. They're not necessarily, having complications of malnutrition, but they can only eat enough to meet their needs with zero flexibility. And when I talk to them about it, I'm like, my worry for you is that you're only half recovered. When we envision like what is healthy eating,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just getting, X grams of this and Y grams of that. It's the whole gestalt, the whole big picture that includes social eating and flexibility and spontaneity.
We're so done with New Year, New You. This year, it's more you on Bumble. More of you shamelessly sending playlists, especially that one filled with show tunes. More of you finding Geminis because you know you always like them. More of you dating with intention because you know what you want. And you know what? We love that for you. Someone else will too. Be more you this year and find them on Bumble.
Bored with your boring cardio? Stop pedaling that snooze cycle to nowheresville and try some cardio that's actually fun. Supernatural fitness, available on MetaQuest. Isn't that right, Jane Fonda?
Cardio will never be boring again.
Sweat to the beat of thousands of chart-topping songs inside stunning virtual landscapes.
Bet your stationary bike can't do that.
Visit GetSupernatural.com and join the next fitness revolution. Supernatural VR Fitness, only on MetaQuest. Rated Teen for Teen.
What are some of the other phrases you hear young kids and teenagers say that are big red flags that you're like, oh, there's a body image problem here?
Definitely when I hear them use the terms healthy and unhealthy. I think those terms are bandied around a little too much and they oversimplify things a little too much. When I hear, well, I'm just trying to eat like fewer carbs. Why? What's inherently bad about carbs?
Okay. So even if a parent hears a child say like carbs or protein or starting to talk about the components of food, that's like, why are you knowing that?
I would be concerned about that. I would say, first of all, why would a 12-year-old or an 11-year-old say carb, C-A-R-B?
Right.
This alone is weird.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, why that awareness? Why that lingo? People only use the phrase or the word carb in a diet-related context.
What about skipping meals, or are there structures to the meal day that are alarming that you could see in a kid?
I think definitely if you see that your kid is like running off to school and not eating breakfast, if you see that they are skipping meals, to me, the single biggest red flag is if there are foods they used to like and enjoy, and now they're not eating those foods anymore. And I don't really care why they're not eating it, whether they say they don't like it, whether they say they're just not hungry, whether they say they're just not interested. That's a huge red flag to me. They used to like meatloaf, now they won't eat it. That makes zero sense from a physiologic standpoint. There's something emotional or behavioral that's making them avoid that food, and you have to kind of try to figure out what it is.
So a change in their eating habits, which also, if there's a big change in their exercise, that's probably a red flag as well, I would think.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think is very difficult in children is detecting problematic weight loss. Because if an adult, like a 30-year-old person, loses 20 pounds, like you could probably see it on them. The problem is because children are constantly growing and developing, they are supposed to be gaining weight and growing taller in having normal, pubertal changes in body composition. It is significantly harder to simply look at a kid and be aware that they did not grow the way they would have had they been adequately nourished or not over-exercising. This is where regular contact with your primary care doctor is really, really important, especially during the adolescent years when a lot of people may not prioritize seeing a primary care doctor for a well check as frequently because their kids aren't sick, and preventive care tends to be prioritized much more for like younger kids who need vaccines and things like that. But a change in your growth curve in children and adolescents is probably the first tip off that something might be happening. And what I often see is this kid has been following some sort of restrictive diet for several years, and they've just they haven't necessarily lost weight, but they've kind of been frozen in time. They have not gained weight or height in a couple of years at a time when we would have expected them to grow. And, I'm like, this chart says you're 15, but you look like a 9-year-old.
Like they're not going through puberty, not getting their period.
Yeah.
Big red flag.
So regular, just preventive contact with your primary care doctor at least once a year, I think is really, really important. The youngest kid I've ever taken care of who had just true blue anorexia, indisputably, was 6 years old.
Yikes.
And when I talked to her about her body image or tried to explore her body image, I mean, if you asked her, like, how do you feel about your weight or shape? Like, she couldn't answer that question. She's 6. Yes, exactly. But it was more on the basis of her observed behaviors. So if you tried to put butter on her bread, she would scream. She would throw it. She would run away. If you tried to put dressing on her salad, she would again have a very big reaction. Sometimes she would scream, I'm fat, or you're making me fat. But if in a calm moment you tried to probe about her body image, like, I don't think you would get very far. I often meet caregivers and parents who are concerned about their kids' weight or shape. Very often that concern developed after a visit with their pediatrician. And they have been looking at ways to try to help their kids, often on social media, and often uncover things like intermittent fasting and keto diets, or paleo, or veganism, or being gluten-free, or, any of those kinds of things. And sometimes it comes from the child. Sometimes the child is the one who's, quote unquote, educating the rest of their family on what's healthy. And it's like, we all are going to go keto together. We're all going to be vegan together. Like there's a lot of that happens in families. And I would say that any kind of diet, especially any kind of diet that makes unrealistic promises, is not to be trusted. A few ways to recognize a fad diet include any diet that tells you to eat a lot of one thing and to avoid or eliminate another thing. That is not normal. Dietary diversity is very important for overall health. Any diet that tells you stop eating X and only eat Y is not a trustworthy or scientifically based diet. Any diet that involves recommending specific supplements, which are often available for purchase, are also not to be trusted. And I think that helping your kid to learn to recognize those qualities in any fad diet is important because fad diets are changing all the time. If you think about the evolution of fad diets, I mean, there were things like the cabbage soup diet in the 70s that I think a lot of kids today would not necessarily know about anymore. Yeah. But then today there's the Beyonce diet, which is, involves lemon juice and cayenne pepper. And it's bizarre.
Makes my stomach hurt thinking about that.
Yeah. And especially any diet that recommends you eat non-food items. There are many.
Right? Like apple cider vinegar.
Or cotton balls.
What?
Or, to fill up your stomach.
Oh, that is horrifying.
Yeah. Or I'm not making this up. There's an air diet.
Oh, what's that?
It's sort of, I think it might be called the air diet or the smell diet. It's you smell foods to give you a sense of satisfaction without eating them.
Oh my God, that would just make me hungrier. You smell popcorn and you're like, I must eat popcorn right now.
Correct. But the idea is that the smell is enough to satisfy you. And then you can just go drink some water. Do you know what I mean? And it's
that's just
restrictive. Those things are messed up.
Yeah.
And I think this again comes back to the importance of teaching your kids to fact check. No matter what the specifics of that fad diet are, these are red flags that say, don't trust this diet. It doesn't make sense. Yeah. And also diets that may be experimented with among adults cannot necessarily be safely used in children and adolescents. So if a 65-year-old wants to try intermittent fasting to control their blood sugar a little bit better, fine. I'm not going to comment on that, even though I am going to comment on that. I still don't think that's a great idea. But if they want to try it, fine. Please don't suggest that your 15-year-old do the same. Their needs are too great.
There's really no better person to ask about how to raise kids who have a normal, healthy approach to eating than an adolescent medicine specialist who takes care of kids of all ages from age 6 to the late 20s with eating disorders. It's not all anorexia. Unfortunately, disordered eating can appear in a lot of different ways. And if a person's patterns of eating interfere with their social life or their daily life, that is concerning. Do you worry about going to a restaurant or a party because there might not be food for your child? Pediatricians are well-trained to help families dealing with eating issues. And yes, sometimes we don't say the right things. That's why I recorded a bonus episode about how clinicians can talk about weight and eating with patients that helps them grow to enjoy food and like who they are. So here's your challenge. It's holiday season, so that means you can do some celebration eating and enjoy it. Celebration eating is part of being a good role model. Thank you to Dr. Maya Kumar, Associate Clinical Professor at UC San Diego and Rady Children's Hospital San Diego. She helps the most difficult cases find their way back and helps us all to raise adolescents who are ready to be on their own. And isn't that what we all want? For more from the Pediatrician Next Door, find me on the web at pediatriciannextdoorpodcast.com. If you've got a question about the weird things kids do, send an email to hello@pediatriciannextdoorpodcast.com for a chance to hear your voice on the show. I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter, and I'm the Pediatrician Next Door. This show is produced by Red Rock Music. Make sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever it is you're listening. I'll be back next time with more.